Welcome to Boundless Pursuit, a weekly podcast providing motivation, entertainment, and education to anglers and outdoorsmen. I hope that the stories you'll find here will encourage you to chase your passion more fervently, to open your mind to new opportunities and perspectives. Your engagement and feedback is critical to the growth of this show, and I would love to hear your suggestions on topics or potential guests. You can reach me at boundlesspursuitfishing@gmail.com or at my website, www.boundless-pursuit.com. That's where you'll find all related articles, media, and merchandise. Please remember, the show will gain traction from your support. Be sure to like, comment, and share this podcast to your friends and connections. I'm your host, David Graham. Now let's get on to today's episode. On this podcast, I always favor the guys that take the grassroots approach. I love the underdogs, the less appreciated or underutilized fish species and approaches. Today's guest is Keith Severns, and he takes a really unique approach to his pursuit of one of the most underutilized or underappreciated species of monster fish here in the U.S., the flathead catfish. And the flathead is one of the few species here in the U.S. with the capability of reaching over 100 pounds. So that puts this fish in a rare class. But this isn't a fish that wants to eat stink bait or garlic-soaked hot dogs. These fish are predators, and predators will eat lures. And Keith chases these marauding brawlers with artificial lures, and he fishes from inflatable float tubes. So moving under the power of his own legs, he positions himself in, over, and around all the snags and tangles, cover, and concealment that flatheads like to live in, where he's dropping lures right into their home. Now, these fish are notoriously hard fighters, and a lot has to go right and certainly be done right to assure success. So during this conversation, Keith pitches very emphatically why anglers should be chasing flatheads and how they can up their odds. And these catfish guys, they always seem gritty and ready for a fight. And Keith definitely brings that kind of energy into this conversation, where we really need to dispel a lot of the myths about the fish. This is a bad dude who's absolutely got this fish dialed in. This is Keith Severns. All I had to do is turn the damn volume up. But anyway. All right, man. One last swig of coffee, and then we'll roll into it.
All right.
So, Heath. All right. Anyway, man, I'm excited I got you on here because, this podcast, there's no rhyme or reason to this thing. I'm doing freshwater, saltwater, East Coast, West Coast. I got dudes that have come on from the Arctic, guys from South America. I got a dude from Germany that I'm talking to tomorrow. So it's like, it's all the stuff I just find interesting. You know what I mean? And some of it's stuff some of it's like not even necessarily stuff I'm interested in, but it's fishing and I want to learn about it. But you specialize in a species that I find very fascinating. Like, and I hold like in America, it's like top tier, like heavyweights. You know what I mean? Like we have our like, it's like I look at it like fighting, like boxing or like MMA or something where there's weight classes. And it's like we have our heavyweights in the United States.
Yeah, and we treat them like dog poo. The flatheads don't get the respect they deserve. They are the freshwater shark, baby. They are the apex predator of freshwater.
Yeah. There you go. The flathead is what we're talking about.
I love you're talking about the coolest fish on the planet. One of the coolest fish on the planet.
Yeah. Well,
they have to be one of God's favorites. They just have to. You know why I know that, David? They come in so many different. Every bass looks like another bass. Every blue cat looks like every other blue cat, except for the piebald. Every bullhead, basically. Yeah. Flatheads. I've never caught two flatheads that look alike. I catch them brindles, malted, rusties, grays, blacks, palominos. There's even nuclear yellows. I mean, the gamut just goes on and on. The olives, the browns, there's greens. The colors of the flathead spectrum and the way they're all so unique. And then beyond color, they all have certain scars all over their bodies too. You can always you don't need to tag a flathead. They all have the specific scars. They're crazy, man. I love them.
Well, they have that just warrior, like just monster look to them. You know what I mean? It's like there's like sporty little beautiful pretty fish, and then there's just the ones that like their whole purpose is to just be like warriors. And I don't know, man, like that gets me fired up more than. Granted, there's a time and place for something like a rainbow trout, but there's also a time and place to go into the darkness, fishing at night for a fish that frightens you. You know what I mean? And I feel like the flathead's kind of in that category. Though we pretty much just opened a can of worms on this conversation that I knew was inevitable, and that is, and maybe we'll start with this just to set the tempo. That is like this weird dynamic with the American angler, where it seems like there's this contempt for a lot of our biggest, strongest, meanest fish. And I don't understand it. I don't know where it started, why it is. But yeah, you're certainly right. The flathead is, with a lot of people, been thrown into that category of like, I don't know. I don't want to say undesirable, but like, you know, they're cursed with the fact they have a big mouth and they eat other fish, and some of those other fish might be fish people like catching more. They've
become a scapegoat, David. In essence, you know, these guys in Georgia, they'll clean out their bream or their red ear sunfish, and they'll say it was the flathead catfish to do. The flatheads keep systems balanced. They are nature's way of checks and balances. We need those big predators in our freshwater systems. Our systems are getting overrun with rough fish species: carp, gar, buffalo, quillback. You know what I mean? All these rough species. We need big predators. The problem is, I think a lot of it is the biologists didn't really know back in the day. The biologists gave flatheads a bad name and say they ate everything. And then, you know, people listen to them. The biologists were only book taught the money-making hatchery species, the bass, these species you stock in the reservoirs that people pay their good money to come fit. Nobody cared about the flathead back then in the day. They were just thought of as a trash fish. Yeah. They didn't realize the value of them. I think a lot more systems would be way better fisheries if they had bigger flatheads in them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Systems are getting overrun with shad. I guess it doesn't. Every waterway is different, but I do believe that the flathead's way of checks and balances is, and I can prove it through this. I love all species of fish. I love them all. If anything tugs on my rod, I'm down for it.
Yeah.
My best multi-species fisheries are also my best flathead fisheries. And that says a lot right there. If I'm catching the biggest, baddest flatheads from these systems, but also catching nice crappie, nice bass, you have a healthy system.
Yeah. Well, it's such a shallow way of thinking. I've observed a lot of the biggest, most visible fish like that, like an alligator gar, like we talked about before we started recording, has suffered the same sort of thing because they're so visible.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? It's like when you pull into your little backwater cove and suddenly you've been fishing out that same hole for years and years and years. And then one day there's just less fish there. And then this 7-foot long thing with big sharp teeth rolls next to you. A lot of shallow-minded people are going to be like, that thing ate everything in here. The flathead kind of gets the same thing because their mouth is big. And so you assume, and yes, they do eat big fish, but it's a good point. When you think of like rough fish species that nothing else is eating, something like a carp or a quillback or larger suckers or larger shad or any like large rough fish, there has to be an apex predator.
Smallmouth buffalo. Yeah. The list goes on and on.
There has to be an apex predator, like a top-level predator, to keep them in check. If you take flatheads, I think we're talking specifically about where fish are native to as well. That's kind of an important point. When you talk about like native range fish, or where they've been there long enough that they've established themselves there. You take a fish like that out, and you're going to see a collapse of the ecosystem, or one of those other fish is going to like proliferate to the point that it overwhelms the system. So I totally agree. I don't know why people can't wrap their head around that.
It's really sad. The native range of the alligator gar used to be gigantic, David. Now what do we have in the U.S.? 2 good spots you can fish for them. The Trinity River in Texas. And there's a few spots in Louisiana for big alligator gar. They used to be prevalent. We've already wiped out the alligator gar, and we're still wiping that. They're letting people bow fish.
Yeah.
And now what do we have left as our big predator to keep these systems in check? The flatheads. And now if you've noticed, they're not getting wiped out yet. But if you notice over the decades, like I have, when my uncles and my dad started me off in it, it was really not a big deal to catch an 80, 90 or hear about an 80 or 90, 100-pound flathead being caught back in the 70s and 80s. We don't see 90 and 100-pound flatheads anymore. It's perpetually downsizing. As everybody's keeping these giants throughout the decades, we're having smaller fish mating with smaller fish. Mm-hmm. And it's decimating the size of these flatheads. And people, and they don't understand the amount of time that it takes to grow a giant flathead.
Yeah.
A 50-pound flathead is an old fish. Think how old a 100-pound flathead is. We don't let them grow that long. That's a whole different concept in Europe with those wells. Those people revere those fish. That they respect them.
Yeah.
They let them get to those giant old age. I know whales genetically get bigger than flatheads, but the way they let them, it keeps them at those giant sizes. We're decimating our giant sizes.
Well, that is an interesting thing about flatheads, and I know we spoke again about this the other day when we were just chatting. The records with flatheads is a really weird thing to me because the world record is so much bigger. There's such a giant gap between the world record, the current world record, and the next one's in line. And I really wanted to bring you on here to pick your brains to figure out why is that? It's not even it's like this insurmountable size fish, like over 120 pounds or something like that. And that was, I guess a point of curiosity for me is well, how come no one's even come close to that? Are these fish just being culled out? What happened to them?
A lot of the alternative guys back in the 80s and 90s did get close, but they were using alternative methods. These guys are catching these giant fish on jugs, limb lines, and trout lines. And those 3 methods alone has what has been decimated the big catfish population.
Yeah.
And a lot of these old boys, they're doing it like Grandpappy told them. And then Pappy told them, and they're running 100 hook trout lines. They're running limb line. Now they got diddy poles. You'll see PVC plastic poles every 50 feet down a mile stretch of river. How many hooks in the water do you need to catch a damn fish? Yeah. And the problem is they're keeping them all.
Yeah.
They were taught to keep them. People look at me, I'm crazy for releasing a good-sized flathead.
I think that's the big difference maker there. There's a culture behind catfish that is, at least that has it's like a historic culture. I think there's a growing culture in catch and release, but right now there's this massive culture of never releasing any catfish. If somebody gets caught catching and keeping a 10-pound bass plus, they're going to get run out of town by the bass community.
Yes.
But it is you're a weirdo. The good old boys down in the South, if they go and they catch a 60-pound flathead, that thing is coming back home in the back of the truck so we can show the neighborhood. That's
damn right.
That's the sad part. Yeah.
Right. And then we're going to nail his skull to the telephone pole or the tree or the fence post.
I know. That part's the crazy part.
It's a trophy.
Yeah.
But I think a huge part that would help the flatheads tremendously would be if they could shut down some of these alternative. I think times have changed so much. We don't need people running trout lines. We don't need people hanging hooks in the water off of every limb and tree down the river. We don't need jugs floating around unattended. We don't need noodlers. We don't need people messing with the flathead nest during their most precious time. And those people are pulling giants off the nest and ruining the eggs. When they're fighting those fish in the nest, the eggs go everywhere. That nest is ruined.
Yeah.
And those giant fish are the ones that put out the 3-pound egg sacs with the big eggs.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a bigger egg, you have a bigger fry, and you have a fish that has genetically more potential to become a giant.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
I was really definitely interested to get your opinion on the noodling thing, because I had always thought that. I'm like, I can't get behind, because people are like, would you ever noodle? Like, aren't you worried about snapping turtles? I'm not worried about anything in the water. What I'm worried about is, like, it just doesn't sit right with me, the idea that, they're capitalizing on the maternal and paternal instincts of the fish to guard their nest and guard their next generation. All they're doing is protecting a clutch, and you're harassing a fish that, especially the big ones that are there, like they are sitting on top of a gold mine that's going to be the next generation of these big fish.
They don't understand.
And you're jacking it up. And
what's really sick, what really pisses me off is the guys that plant boxes, and then the fish is completely trapped by 3-4, and all they got to do is grab them and wrestle them out. And they're planting boxes. People will do anything to catch a flathead. They're shooting them. They're spotlighting them at night. They're snagging them. And then people are finding out where their wintering holes are. And when they stack up like cordwood in 30-foot holes in the winter, they're snagging them. Yeah. Even the people that say they're catching them, they're running swim baits through that deep hole real slow. Yeah, and they're hooking it in the lips or in the head or by the mouth, and they say, that fish swiped at it. No, that fish is facing up current, and you ran your swim bait down current, and you're snagging him in the face.
Yeah, well, people do the same thing with paddlefish and stuff, too. It's like, it makes you feel a little bit better that it's you're snagging, but maybe it feels better that it's a lure. But yeah, man. It is.
Well, I think another thing you touched on about the noodling it became so popular with the rise of these reality shows, and we had shows about it. This hillbilly hand fishing show became real popular. There was a couple others, and then noodling just took off. I mean, I can see the fun of it. I mean, I've done it. I've done it myself. I've noodled. Back in my younger day, when and then I would see what we were doing to those stretches of rivers, these groups of noodlers that I were with, I was seeing them keep them all. And then, when I'd go back through there a year or two later, I could see how decimated the big flatheads were through there from what they took.
Well, at least
and I was left with the dinks.
At least as far as the noodling goes, it's not. At least that's not like a nationwide. I don't know the legality behind it from state to state, but I'm like, if I'm not mistaken, it is illegal in a lot of places. It is. But I don't know if that's for conservation reasons or, I don't know. But at least that is not super widespread. But
our next state over, Missouri, has made it illegal. Mm-hmm. It makes me think those conservation and the Department of Wildlife guys are a lot smarter than the Kansas guys where I'm at.
Well, I remember fishing. I remember fishing the Red River between Oklahoma and Texas for alligator gar years ago, and it was an interesting place because I think in Texas it's illegal, but in Oklahoma it's legal. And you'd see these guys. It happened to us a couple of times where we'd be fishing. All of a sudden, you see a head bobbing downriver, and like, oh man, here comes some noodlers, and they'd work their way down the bluff side of which side was that? Anyway, I think that was the Oklahoma side. But yeah, they come noodling on our side. The hell, they probably noodle both sides. But we saw that what you mentioned. There was because we went out there at times when the water was low, and we'd find these big drums. They had like sunk these big like metal drums under the water tied to a rope with cinder blocks. Because I kept thinking, what are these drums? And then the one year they came by noodling, then it all made sense. I'm like, that's kind of weird.
They make boxes, they sink drums, they sink those 55-gallon plastic barrels. It's sad, man.
Yeah. Well, that's
just so they can, and that's another big reason what you were just talking about earlier. You don't understand why the world record flathead hasn't been touched in 30 years.
Yeah.
A big part of it is because these states that produce those giants, Kansas has the world record where I live, 123 pounds, Elk City Reservoir, almost nearly 30 years ago. And Kansas hasn't come close since because of all the takings of the bigs. We just don't have those genetics anymore. Yeah. There's one place that might have a shot. It's Lake Tawakoni, Texas.
I fished there before.
That place grows giant blues and giant flatheads. I believe a guy just a few months ago caught one near a 90-pound flathead. Yeah. So there's some giants in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So some of those reservoirs like that in the South have a chance.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting thing. I think they need the right. They need like a vocal group behind them to a point. It's a weird thing because you're gonna get the people that are running the trot lines and the jug lines and the limb lines, just the commercial guys that are gonna come up and they're gonna plead their case and this is how I support my family and we've been doing this for generations and you're encroaching on my rights, and it's like, I don't know, it's kind of enough. Is there even is it one of those species of fish that has any protections at all, or is it one of those are there any seasons or limits on them at all that you know of in any states? Because I don't know about them.
Tennessee just did a really good thing. Tennessee, I believe, I may be mistaken here, but I'm pretty sure you can only keep one over 34 inches. And I think that'd be one over 34 sounds fair to me. In Kansas right now, one guy can take 5 flatheads any size. So if me and two buddies went to this low water dam and caught them on a good night, we could pretty much clean out that dam.
Yeah.
We don't have huge dams here in Kansas. You know what I mean? Right. I kept 5 and Tom, Dick, Harry, and Bubba kept 5. We just had a stellar night. We all kept our 5 of any size. We just wiped out a huge chunk of that river. You know how many I would probably say, if that night happened, we probably took 200 years with a fish if you added the flathead ages of each fish.
Yeah. Well, it's been my experience with the people who go and do that practice where they show up, they keep as many as possible, and they do that. Where the real problem is, they come back the next night and do it again. It's like, how much room do you have in your freezer? Who are you feeding? I get it. Okay, you win. They do the same thing with the alligator gar, maybe the bow fishermen before. Now they're getting some protections. But, you used to see these images of boatloads of fish. It's like, okay, well, congratulations. You have a year's worth of food. But no. They're coming back tomorrow night, too. That's where you're like, what in the world are you doing?
Yeah. It comes back to some of those old misconceptions. It comes back to these people think that these fish are magically replaced somehow. Like when the next set of rains or when the river comes up again, that hole's going to fill back up with new fish.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that way. I mean, new fish do come in, but there should always be resident fish in an area. You don't kill all the residents and then wait for new residents to move in with the next set of big rains.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a backwards way of thinking that got taught down through the generations. And there's so many misconceptions about flatheads. Mm-hmm. I mean, and you even said one of them earlier. You talked about night, like in the middle of the night. Guess what? You just as likely to catch a flathead in the middle of the day, baby. They love the daytime. I think more big flats are caught in the daytime than the nighttime. That's another misconception. The biologists just back in the day, the biologists knew nothing about them. They're a mystery fish. So they said what they thought they knew about them, and it just kept carrying on through the decade. The only real people that knew about them at the time were the true hardcore flatheaders that were on the river every damn night and every weekend out there with these fish, learning the behaviors of the giants, but none of those people were ever documented,
It is funny you mentioned that because, now that you mention it, most of the big flathead photos I see online, they're never at night. I never thought about that. I guess, my line of thinking is like, you see this big fish that has these little bitty eyes and you assume, oh, that must be a nocturnal species. But I mean, I guess they have such enhanced other senses. They don't even need their eyes as much, but, I'll be learning as we go. Now, the misconception that I think a lot of anglers lump all catfish into that same category. And it's been my experience that like a blue catfish and a flathead catfish are like not even comparable. In that, like, I think it's the predatory nature of the flathead that I think could make them like the next big thing with the American angler if they just realize the potential to go out and pursue them in a proactive way. It doesn't have to be a bait and wait. And I think your approach that I've seen is so badass. I'm like, I've got to try that one day. And so I want to kind of get into that, and we'll keep talking about just the fish itself. But I think the nature of the fishing is what's absolutely going to draw the interest from people who, I don't know, may not have flatheads on the radar. Because the thing that you're doing right now out of these float tubes and these I don't know if that's the right term for it. These like fishing tubes. You're like floating the river in these tubes and fishing for them with artificial lures. And I'm like, that is awesome. You got
to come on down, baby.
Dude, I'm telling you, that's what I really want to do. It. That's like hunting.
You're in Florida. Come on up. Come on up.
Yeah, that's right. Come on up and over. But but then I get into it. I'm like, I don't know that I've seen anybody else that's doing that. And of course, I'm not in that world, but it makes me wonder like how you got onto that. So just, I don't know, man, like walk me through how you got onto this tube fishing with flatheads and just the nature of the fishing, the approach, just, I don't know, walk me through all the details of that style of fishing because it's so awesome.
Okay. Well, I had a good father. He started me off, I think I was 5 years old, and he took me bass fishing. And we used these little Rapala topwater pencil baits, the original Rapala. And these bass were hitting my line, and I was reeling in, 1 and 2 pound bass. And ever since the first day I ever went fishing, I was hooked for life.
Yeah.
Now, I'd say, I think I was 12 years old. My dad got into float tube fishing. Back then, it was just these big circular U-shaped things, and you sat in there. You were in the water about chest deep. You could barely, keep your rod up to jig, but it was still fun. And I think I've been tubing since I was 12 years old. And then, I was, he was a bass guy, so I was a bass and crappie guy too. And that was the end all be all. I thought like everybody else, catfish or trash fish, channel cats are good eating sometimes. I didn't even know what a flathead was back then, for a long time. So long story short, this one moment in my life happened. I want to say it was when I was 27 years old. I'm in a floodway canal fishing for crappie from my float tube.
Yeah.
I'd been float tubing this whole time and never encountered a flathead before through all my artificial journeys. This one time I'm jigging out in front of laydowns and brush piles with I had this 2-jig setup, where I was just vert jigging right on the edges. The float tube's awesome for that. You can get right up next to all that cover and stuff. Mm-hmm. You don't have a trolling motor. It's the most stealthy style of fishing for starters. There's nothing stealthier than a float tube. So I'm jigging, I'm catching some nice slab crappie, but then I get the thump. And it's what I now become known as the super thump, is what I call it. Because it's a thump that reverberates through your line and through your rod. It's a jolt through your whole body. And I feel this heavy weight just pulling on me. And it takes me on a float tube right up and down this drainage canal for 30 minutes. I'm using I'm pretty sure I had 10-pound line and just a nice ultralight setup. Pretty good reel drag. But this thing was taking me wherever it wanted to go. I'm very lucky he didn't just pull me straight back into that cover. For some reason, he went cross river, and I was able to just hang with him, hanging on for dear life, wondering and then I think it was probably 25 minutes later, pulled up a 30-pound flathead and wondering, what have I been doing my whole life?
Yeah.
Chasing these crappie and bass. What have I been doing my whole life?
Yeah.
I go, this is it. This is the pinnacle of fresh water around. And then ever since then, I just started upsizing for my crappie stuff and learning their behaviors. And I understood that they love that same kind of cover and deep, dense rocks and wood like crappie. Crappie and flathead have a connection, and it all developed from there, from crappie fishing. And I'd been on the tube already a long time, and then the two just kind of fused together.
Yeah. Well, that kind of answers some of the question, because I'm like, well, now I know the tube actually came first. So it was like something you'd already been doing. But I think the advantages kind of speak for themselves, just like tactically. But then the other side of that is probably it just looks funner than being in a boat. Because, when I see what you're doing, part of me is like, why wouldn't you just use a boat? Like, why wouldn't you just use a kayak or something? But the float tube is like, I think the adventure element has got to be a big part of the reason. But yeah, I can absolutely see the stealth. The nature of the fishing seems so interesting to me too, because it's like, I mean, are you casting, or are you just dropping like into the holes and stuff? Or
that's
both?
The thing. It's a little bit of everything. Sometimes I'm pitching to cover, and I stay a little bit away from it at first, and I'll pitch to cover, and I'll let a big soft plastic flutter down. I'll do that slow flutter fall. Flatheads always hit almost 95% of the time on that drop.
Okay.
And I want a nice slow flutter fall drop right next to that cover. So I'll pitch. I cast. I swim things. I'll tell you one thing. You're about to get me fired up. Vertical jigging. I would say if I had to pick one technique, vertical jigging is the number one best technique overall for flatheads. There's just something about that pop, pop, drop, and flutter fall. That pop, pop, drop, and flutter fall. And it just, that in their face drop, even if they're in a negative or neutral state, it's like apple pie. And if it smells good and it looks good and it's dropping and looks alive, how can they not? They just thump it.
Now, I mean, to your knowledge, are you basically like is it almost like you're searching for the fish, or are they coming to the lure, or is it more or less you're finding where they're already sitting and putting it directly in front of a fish that's sitting there? Like, are they like traveling over to get it, or is this like you're really working a brush pile, you're really working an area of snags, and like it's like searching for the fish, or is it bringing their attention from further away?
A lot of times I don't know. Sometimes there are cruising fish. I mean, was that fish sitting on that boulder waiting to ambush, or did I just happen to pass him as he's cruising by me? Sometimes I don't know that. But the thing about this flow tube with artificials, that's the thing. You're covering so many more of these spots where you can connect with one. Yeah. Whereas if you're a live bait guy and you throw out a bluegill, There almost has to be one there, or you have to wait a long time for one to move in. I'm actively moving, searching, jigging, pitching, casting, trying all these different things. And I'm increasing my odds because I'm putting my offerings in front of far more fish. I know there's probably fish in some of these spots and I'm not triggering them and they're in a neutral mood. But if I move on and keep jigging boulders and keep jigging brush piles, I'm probably going to find one that's going to thump the shit out of it. You know what I mean?
I like the active engagement in the process too, because like you're not just waiting on the fish, like you're engaged in a lot of different ways too. Because I guess like how are you powering the tube? Like your legs are working. It's a full body engagement in the process.
Yeah,
your eyes are looking, your arms are working, your legs are maneuvering. I mean that's a full body experience where you've got to be like so keyed in on the process. It just seems way more like, I don't know, man, exhilarating and intense than like, I don't want to say normal fishing, brother. But yeah,
it is intense. And the most intensive part about it is when you're going along there jigging a big set of boulders, just the anticipation of that super thump I was talking about. You just you'll get those tingles. Your senses, your flathead senses will start tingling, and you're just like, "Oh, this is good. I should get thumped." And you're just, you know what I mean? It's just you could get thumped at any moment. You just get the feeling you're in the right place at the right time. That's a huge part of flatheading. You just got to put yourself in the right place at the right time. More probably with flatheads than with anything because they so rarely bite. I mean, a flathead is usually only active for 1 hour in a 24-hour period.
Yeah.
And so your key feeding windows, you have to time in on these fish. So, and that means you have to be out there on the water. You can't time fish unless you're out there yesterday and know when the active period, and it's constantly changing. You have to keep constantly updating when their timing is, and then that can change with the weather patterns as well, with the wind, with the moon, with everything. There's so many decisions to make.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you know what? And I'm guessing by now, you mentioned that you caught your first one on crappie gear. Surely there was like an upgrade in the hardware and an evolution.
Oh hell yeah! That evolved. Definitely. I had to keep going heavier and heavier because I'd get some of these big flatheads on, and I didn't get so lucky as that first time. Yeah. And they'd pull me under a big concrete, or a big chunk of wood or a tree, and game over. So, yeah, I definitely had to start upgrading my gear from there.
The gear is interesting to me, too, because, it doesn't help that the fish are tremendously powerful, even without the hazard of the snags. But then you mix in the fact that they're so powerful and they're, generally their proximity, I guess, is close to things that they can cut you off on, wrap you up in. And you're in a tube to where, like, they can pull you, like you're going with them. You know what I mean? So what is your hardware? You know what I mean? Like what kind of line are you dropping down there? What was it like the type of gear that you're juggling with is, I don't know, how heavy is the line? How heavy is the rod? How heavy is everything?
Well, before we get into the gear, there's something special I need to touch on that you just touched on. How am I fighting these fish out of a tube? There's a certain way I learned. I've learned that flatheads love to fight in a circular pattern. So the first thing I do, say I'm jigging a log jam with some gold eels, and I get that thump. First thing I do, I've got to kick as hard as I can. You got to have powerful fins. If you ever go float tube fishing, don't skimp on cheap fins. You got to have good fins because that's your motor.
Yeah.
You got to get them away from there as fast as possible. And then once you get them out in that little bit of open water, I can start spinning with my flippers. I can like say I'm in my float tube. I can spin myself like you're in a little U-boat, imagine it, with your flip, and I can start going in a 360.
Yeah.
I start doing that same motion with the flathead, and he'll actually start doing it with me.
Yeah.
And therefore, and I can just keep him going in a circle out there in the open water, and I can tire him out. I mean, this doesn't work every time. Sometimes they're going to just drag me into some shit and I lose them. But the circular thing has really helped me catch some big ones from the tube. Getting them out, just out of that cover and just letting them fight me on that circular pattern. And I'm 360 in my tube. This shit needs to be filmed. You need to see me doing some 360s. I'm getting fired up just thinking about it. So when that all works out, I can usually tire them out. And then, I just pull them up on my legs like a landing platform. And I get to meet the beast and kiss the beast and photo the beast and release the beast.
So what's cool is like in that type of fishing, a lot of people, I think when they think catfishing, you're thinking rod spreads. You got like 4 or 5 rods out, gear all over the place. You've had to take your gear and I'm assuming like really take a minimalistic approach because you don't have a lot of room, I guess.
Dude, I cannot take much on that flow tube. I have 2 little pouches on each side. Yeah. And like I can throw a bucket, like tubes have like this trunk. I wish I could kind of show you, but I can put a bucket or like a little milk crate back there full of stuff. But you definitely have to minimize. But that is an evolution thing too, just like my gear was an evolution. I learned how to what do I need to take for I'm going to go to this waterway. I need to have this, and this. Mm-hmm. And I need to have this jig box, and I need to have these plastics. I need to have these swim baits, and I need to have these scents. And we can talk about that a little bit too. Scents are a huge part of my artificial game.
I was definitely curious on that. I was thinking like, me, I'm like, I'd be worried I'd be dropping all my gear off. I'd probably lose the rod. Like I would tether the rod to the tube because, you described pulling the flathead into your lap. I'm like, where's the rod during all of this? Like, do you have something you can stick it in?
Yeah. Yeah. The tubes sometimes come in with these little sleeves on them that you can stick your rod handle down.
Okay.
Or I've learned lots of other ways, but yeah, you can throw it in that trunk. Like I said, there's this little V-shaped trunk in the back of the tubes, but, a lot of guys build their own PVC. Some of these tubes these days, if you go to a float tube farm, you would be freaked out. They are like fully decked out, live scope, electronics, all these crazy rod holes. But compared to me and my tube, it's just me and my tube and my flippers and a rod. I'm very minimalistic. I do have a depth finder that I have outfitted that can fit on the tube. It's a real cheap Piranha. I rarely use it. If I go to a new body of water, like a little state fishing lake or an area of a reservoir I've never been to, I will use it. But I'd say 80% of the time I go with no electronics.
Yeah. And now, are you worried about like when you're dropping lures down there? I know they're in like heavy timber rocks. Like, I mean, it's like, are you losing a lot of lures, or is there like a way to prevent like?
Yes. No, we all lose a lot of, no matter what you're fishing for, you lose a lot of lures.
Don't drop your favorite lure down there.
I do have a favorite. Can I show you?
Yeah.
Simply for the matter you just discussed. Right, I love giant. This is a big 2-ounce musky skirted jig. Weed guard. And then I can throw any plastic I want on there. I could throw a swim bait on there. I can throw some gulp eels on there. And this will bounce up through some cover I still get snags sometimes, of course, but this helps a lot. I love the big weedless. That's one of my favorite all around. And what I'll do, David, is one of my favorite flat trailers. I talked about scent. I love gulp products. Yeah. The gulp eels have caught me more flatheads than I can even describe to you. something about those scientists at Berkeley did get something right with that scent they put into these things. And, I used to only do one, but why do one when you can do two?
There you go. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you've got more water displacement. You've got these big gulp eels that more scent, more water displacement, more vibration, just a bigger presentation overall.
Yeah. Now this is an opportunity to
giant weedless jig, two gulp eels, one of my favorites of all time.
Now, a lot of people think that catfish like stuff that stinks, that is like rancid and like smells like absolute death. Is this true or not true? Because people think, the stinkier and most foul, and like talk about letting the bait sit out and rot in the sun for a while, and that's gonna like attract them.
No, not with flatheads. That's why I was telling you, flatheads are the sharks. They're the freshwater sharks. They want usually a live male. Like you said earlier, the people are grouped the word catfish into all these behaviors that are totally different. Now, channel cat, they love hot dogs. They love livers.
Yeah.
They love garlic Kool-Aid chicken. Even sometimes the blues do. Even sometimes the blues like that shit. The flatheads know.
Yeah.
The only scent you want with a flathead is fresh, live scent, or like these scents that I put on my baits. What I'm doing, if I'm using a giant crawdad, I'm putting crayfish oils, a natural crayfish oil on them. If I'm using a shad imitation or a big swim bait, I'm putting shad oils. That's the only, you want fresh with flatheads, fresh cut bait. And even if you freeze it, not so great. If you want to do cut bait, you keep it alive and cut it right when you're ready to use it.
Yeah.
Fresh cut and live for flathead. People they get these misconceptions again, like we were talking about earlier, that channel cats and the blues are so different from the flatheads.
Yeah. Now, I would think that like how acute their senses are, that could even work in reverse to where if you used no scent at all, like an unscented plastic, and it had that real strong plasticky smell, is that a turnoff to the flatheads, or are they more like?
Absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
That's good to note.
You want it to be as natural as possible. You want it to look alive, smell alive, act alive. Give it that escape mechanism response when needed.
Yeah.
You know the drill. You've caught so many damn freshwater fish in so many places. You lucky dog, you're living my dream.
Yeah.
How do I get your job?
All right. You know what? I work in a factory. I think people like have this wrong idea on what I do, but I just try to live like a bum in the meantime. But I would think that it's easy to think that you're putting scents on there as an attractant. But I would think it works just as much as like a masking agent. You know what I mean? Like it's almost. It
can.
Yeah.
It does both. It's a double combo. You're getting rid of your human scent on the lure. You're getting rid of the plastisols scents.
Yeah.
And I'm sliming it up with a scent that is going to be really attractive. Imagine if you had a piece of apple pie dangled in front of your face, Dave. But it didn't have the apple pie smell, and it just smelled like something totally different than apple pie. Would you take a bite out of it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think.
Have you ever thought about that? I mean, you want it; it needs to smell right. You know what I mean? The apple pie's got to smell right. The Doritos got to smell right. Anything you throw in their face has got to smell right. I mean, I'm not saying that you can't catch a flathead on a plastic without scent. I mean, a lot of times they're honing in on it with their lateral line, their other senses. You're moving it across in the perfect place, and you're going to catch. I'm just saying it can, definitely up your odds. When you put the right scents on the right baits, it can definitely up your odds.
Yeah, it seems like
moving fast. If I'm using a big crankbait, scent doesn't matter so much. I'm getting that swimming mode. You know what I mean? It's those slow in your face presentations that I'm doing where the scent really comes through.
Yeah, because I would think your two patterns there is going to be scent based and then like vibration, like you said, water displacement. So if like it is not necessarily an application or like an environment where you're going to use scent, it probably needs to compensate with more vibration. But yeah, I think they don't get the credit for being as savvy as they really are. Now, these fish, that's curious to me. This is something I don't know this, but like, is this one of those type of fish that's like, do they have like territories? Like, do you have like certain trees in your river systems that I know the fish that lives on that tree, or are they always moving around?
They have their territories for sure.
So it's almost like musky.
The biggest, baddest fish are going to be on the biggest, baddest structures next to the bait sources. I mean, they just, and it's a pecking order from there. Yeah. Now, do they sometimes let other flatheads? A few flatheads can reside together on a log jam. A few big ones. A big one will let a couple more. It's like they're in packs, wolf packs. And these fish will even hunt together. If a lot of guys notice when they got a spread out, you'll sometimes or not, boom, boom, boom. Your rods, you'll catch 2 or 3 real quick. It's because that wolf pack moved through there together. They hunt. People think flathead. There's another misconception. We're busting so many misconceptions tonight.
I know.
Dave.
I love it.
Flatheads are not solitary creatures. They are when it's time to get to their den and they have their little territorial den where they sleep at night. That's their spot. They're territorial with that, but they are social and they do, I don't know, something clicks with flatheads. And it's like, they all know when it's time, like clockwork. You know what I mean? If guys set a bunch of jug lines or limb lines, a lot of those down a river, a lot of those will go off in that same hour or 2 stretch where there's that feeding window. There's just that flathead clock when, I don't know, they all know. And then those groups that are together, they'll hunt together in wolf pack. It'll be like 4 or 5 flatheads. I've seen this with my own eyes. I've seen 3 giant flatheads one time cruising the tops of weed beds that were just like 2 to 3 foot under the surface. These moss beds. And I saw these giant 3 flatheads cruising the tops of them, hunting bluegills on top of those. It was insane.
That's awesome.
So yeah, a lot of people don't really understand flatheads. So many misconceptions.
Yeah.
So disrespected of a species that deserves. They're so much cooler than a bass, man. So much cooler than a bass.
I know.
Bass get all the love. Bass get all the love.
Well,
you know why? Because every man, woman, and child can catch a. God made bass, so every man, woman, and child can catch a fish.
Well, the bass already has this like massive like marketing machine behind it. That's like this unstoppable freight train. That's like, I don't know. I love catching bass to a point, but.
I do too.
But I don't know, man.
I catch a lot of bass while I'm going for I catch a lot of bass while I'm and other bycatch while I'm fishing for flatheads. I catch big gar, catch big drum, big bass, little bit of anything big that'll take a lure.
Yeah.
But
well, I know we have a mutual friend in Josh Dolan. He's actually the one that told me to check your stuff out. And, he lives.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Shout out, Josh Dolan. Right. What's up, brother?
Yeah. Well, he lives out there in Virginia, and I know they have this like very unique fishery for flatheads every year where they like, it's like they have like this. I don't know if they're migrating for a reason for I don't think it's a spawn thing. I think they're following a migration of shad or something like that. But they have a similar thing where I've seen this cool footage in some of the rivers up there where they have like these mass groups of flatheads come up into these like rapids and the water clarity is like real clear.
Really?
Yeah, and there's these videos of like all like communities of flatheads together, and a lot of the guys will go up there and catch them on fly rods, and catch them in like these big rapids and behind these big boulders with lures, sight fishing for them. Very
And
unique
they're
way
all
to
grouped
catch.
up. And they're all
thick.
grouped up.
Yeah.
Is this like pre-winter? Are they like gathering together to go to the wintering hole? Or what time of year is this?
I think it's an early season thing. Gosh, we're gonna have to reach out to.
Okay,
I don't want to.
so they just came out of the wintering holes.
Yeah, but it's very predictable. It's extremely seasonal. It's always a very specific window of time. If I'm not mistaken, though, it's like it's right during like it's like they're right on the heels because they have a, it's the ocean is downstream. You know what I mean? And so I think it's during the migration of the American shad and stuff they have, and if I'm not mistaken, it has something to do with, some Virginia guy's going to listen to this and be like, listen to this jackass, but I think it might have something more to do with them following the food source, or they stage there in anticipation of the food source coming to them. It's a very interesting dynamic. It's very much all part of a system that I find real fascinating, but they probably don't want me promoting.
I do too. I would like to. I find that fascinating too. I don't get that in my show. I would like to learn more about that myself.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, you have to reach out to Josh. I haven't heard of too many places like that. Like when I saw what they're doing there in Virginia, I'm like, that is so unique. But I can't think of any other rivers that are like that. It's like literally, and like they have like white water in there and stuff, and the flatheads come up in there. And if you look it up, I mean, there's videos of it. It's very interesting. Like I saw some video where some young guys were like snorkeling in the water with them. There's like flatheads all around them, zipping and zooming by all over the bottom, all flying around their heads. I'm like, that is nuts. But
I've had dreams like I had a dream like that where I was swimming in my head. I need to go there.
Oh man, like some of the gear is interesting to me for sure because I don't know, man. Like I was telling you, I've caught flatheads, but not enough to have. I'm not one of those guys that's going to catch 2 fish and then proclaim some level of expertise. You know what I mean? I've encountered a small handful of flatheads, and they just left such an impression on me for like it's the fight. You know what I mean? Like. You want to talk about pound for pound fish. That's what everybody throws that terminology around too much. Pound for pound, like which fish can really throw down. But like I caught a few flatheads that I was just like, wow. Like the type that you sit back in your chair, like, holy cow, like that was a different creature. But, you throw in the element of timber and rocks and things that can break you off, and you can't be out there with like, at least I guess you can be out there with bass gear, but you're playing, you know what I mean? Like, are you using like heavy leader, like monofilament leader? Because I'm wondering, like the whiskers, do they have issue with like a steel leader? Is there like a magnetic signature left by a steel leader that they'll pick up on? Like, do you get that nitty gritty with it? Or because you have to have some kind of abrasion resistance. I don't know if you're using like heavy fluoro leader on the end or what you're doing to contend with the snags, I guess, more than anything.
Well, 9 times out of 10, David, I'm using 80-pound braid mainline.
Okay, yeah.
I like Power Pro Super Slick 8.
Okay.
I don't know why. It's just really smooth and really can feel what's going on the bottom with Power Pro. And then I'm tying on a barrel swivel and a leader.
Okay.
And then I'm using the same, sometimes the same weight mono. I got 80-pound braid, 80-pound Andy mono. Leader, about 2 to 3 foot of it. It acts as a shock absorber.
Mm-hmm.
Then I tie on my lure or my giant jig or whatever. it acts as a shock absorber, and it's much more abrasion resistant. You know, if braid scrapes on rock, that braid's going to cut.
Yeah.
That big heavy mono, you got to have a leader. I'm glad you brought that up. That's a huge. I wouldn't catch half the flatheads I did if I didn't have a big heavy mono leader.
Yeah, and when you're hooking the fish,
So,
I'm thinking I'm thinking like when you first hook the fish, I mean, is it pretty much just like lockdown drag, and you're trying to separate them from that stuff? So it's like,
yes.
So it's not even hardly even playing. I'm like, you're getting the full brunt of their power.
Right. And that's why you need that big barrel swivel, strong barrel swivel, good components. So that's your only two knots. You got your main line to your barrel swivel, and then you got this big, heavy Andy mono, or whatever mono of your choice is. But I mean, I've learned to keep going heavier. I used to do the 40-pound braid to 40-pound leader, and it had to keep going up. But as I got better and I learned how these things were schooling me, and your best chance with a big flathead, don't leave anything to chance. Use at least a 60-pound mono leader.
Yeah.
40's not enough. They'll wrap it, they'll cut it, they'll get into some concrete. Those beasts, they know where every piece of cover in that river system or that creek, they know exactly where to take you to bang you out bad and to get away. It's their power. I'm glad you touched on that. They are one of the most powerful fish. It's unbelievable. When they go on they don't jump like a bass. Oh, heaven forbid they don't jump. So they must suck, right? They have, and they don't give up, man. They'll pull for a long, just when you think you got them, they'll do another bulldoze dive for the bottom. And this, when you think you got them to shore, to the tube, they'll go again. It's just, and this, the power, they have that big square tail, you know, they have that giant square tail. They're very muscular, very strong. They're like, built like pit bulls or something, man. I don't know. They're crazy strong. You got to have big gear, especially if you're fishing near cover. Yeah. If you're fishing some open water, deep sand pit, use 30-pound tests. I don't care.
Yeah. Well, the fact that you're fighting them vertically makes it even more difficult, I feel like, because you're pulling that flat profile of their body like up. So it's like, you know, just their body alone is like a resistant to coming through the water, but also like your rod. Yeah. Like your rod, are you using what do you use, like a 6-foot rod? I wouldn't think you would want this big long rod, like when you're having to pull like this fish to you, you know what I mean? Like these close quarter fights, I wouldn't think you'd want like a 7'6" rod.
Yeah, it's a 7'6" actually.
Okay.
This is a custom James Burke custom rod. It's 7'6", and I want that because
probably so you can reach into the holes where you're dropping it. But
a lot of times I'm traveling down edge lines. I'm traveling down rocky outcroppings, or just riprap boulders. So I can reach out. I don't have to cast. I don't have to pitch. I'm just this far. I'm 7 foot away from my tube, and I'm just pop, pop, drop. As I slowly am flipping with my flippers, cruising this edge line, pop, pop, drop, pop, pop, drop.
Yeah.
And so it's just so I'm a little bit away. I don't want to scare fish and go over the top. I'm 7 foot away. So many times I've got that thump, just cruising, and I'm catching them right by me. They're only 7 foot away and maybe 5 foot down, cruising this riprap shoreline. So it's just, if I had a shorter rod, then I'm closer to the rocks, and I might scare something.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no,
And
that
do you
makes
see what
sense.
I'm saying? I'm just a little bit farther away from them. I can still cruise that edge line with that 7-foot rod. So I'm pop, pop, drop, pop, pop, drop, and I'm cruising and I'm jigging. If that doesn't work, then I, try something else,
Yeah.
or you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's why I like the longer rod, so I can stay just a little bit away without them feeling the water displacement on my fins.
Yeah.
I'm getting a little bit more stealthy with the longer rod.
Now that makes sense.
I'm pretty much on top of them, but I'm not on top of them.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Now, are they? You know what is so interesting about this species is like you see these photos of them in almost no water at all, like even giant ones, and like literally in like what look like ditches you could jump across, and you'll see them in these undercuts under the bank, and that's what always blew my mind is like what they can get themselves up into. I'm sure you saw that photo that went like viral the other day, like it was everywhere. I opened up Facebook and this photo of this flathead sitting in this like hollowed out stump.
Yeah. I saw it. Yeah.
Oh man, it went like surprisingly viral, but it's like it really speaks to like their ability to get into things. But I guess
they love to get in things when the rivers come up and you have all these reinforced concrete pipes and culvert boxes, and they love to get in those engineers' man-made structures and up into those pipes. I've caught them out of the pipes. It's crazy. They'll use it.
Well, now, so what do you think about? I don't know. This is kind of a silly thing to even bring up in the podcast, and I feel like talking about it because it's kind of like the ongoing joke with catfish. I know. I guarantee you, anytime you talk about big catfish to like people who don't really know fishing that well, you always hear the stories of the giant catfish that live down by the dams. Like I bet you've probably been bombarded with that age-old story of the divers that were down at the dam doing underwater repairs, and they turn around and come face to face with the Volkswagen catfish.
They're always the size of a Volkswagen. No other vehicle can. You can't do it with any other vehicle. It has to be a Volkswagen.
So when you're
that's funny, man.
Well, so
I'm sure there have been some divers that have gone down and seen some big cats and were probably scared shitless back in the day. But you and I both know that's a fallacy. Unfortunately, the flatheads don't get that big. I wish they did. They did.
Right. I just wondered, like, if you even entertain the conversation. I hear those things. Will alligator gar get the same thing? It's like there's certain fish that have this like folklore and like legend status behind them. The catfish is probably number one with the Volkswagen. Always a Volkswagen. It's never like a Ford or something.
Can't be a Nissan.
Yeah, I know. when you're at like the cafe or when you're at Waffle House, and the server starts telling you that story, do you just kind of like go along with it, or do you feel compelled to correct them? You just like, what? Let them believe it.
I don't waste my time. I don't. Yeah, time is too precious in this day and age. I just smile and say, that probably did happen.
Yeah,
there's no point. If they're that aloof to the whole situation to begin with, there's no point. And they don't get that, they don't understand.
Yeah.
They just don't understand. Now, if you're in Europe and chasing those Euro whales or going after those giant Japanese Mekong catfish, maybe you could get one like the Volkswagen.
Yeah.
Yeah, not here.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, if the flatheads could have some type of regulations like the blues are getting, maybe the flatheads could get big again. You know what I mean?
Which is weird.
If you look on catfish page, you'll see 70, 80, 90, 100-pound blues. It's a common occurrence.
Yeah,
the flatheads should be the same way. They're not going down the same path. The blues are going down a completely different path because they're protected.
That is a weird dynamic. I think I mentioned to you the other day on Facebook that the blue catfish record is a bizarre one. It's just gotten like astronomically bigger. It's been crushed
Yeah, and we're seeing state records broken all the time.
Yeah.
Not so with the flathead.
I wonder what's behind that. Like, they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, the blue catfish. Like, year over year, it's like that record's not standing more than 3 years before getting beaten.
The blues aren't nearly as affected as all these alternative methods. The blues are this nomadic species that chase pelagic bait fish.
Yeah.
They're not so susceptible to the trout lines and the limb lines, you know. I mean, I'm sure some blues are caught on some, but the blues are more protected too. They're become a tournament species. They've become a hatchery species. You see flatheads in any hatcheries?
No kidding.
No, there are none. The hatcheries don't have hatchery flatheads. Yeah. They raise hatchery blues to take care of the shad problems in many reservoirs. Mm-hmm. The and now the blues are what the big cat tournament fishermen go for.
Yeah.
And that has become huge. So the blues are a money-making fish. The flatheads are way harder to catch than the blues, and therefore not a tournament fish.
Yeah.
Therefore not a moneymaker. Therefore not protected. Are you starting to see the correlations here? That's why we're not seeing the giant flatheads anymore.
Well, I think that blue catfish has the potential to like backfire. You know what I mean? You see blue catfish caught in California. You see them. I know. We mentioned Virginia earlier. Virginia's starting to have some trouble with the blue catfish getting crazy out of control. And that one's legitimate. You know, we talk about the flatheads are eating up everything, but like the blue catfish in Virginia is they make up such a massive amount of the biomass in the rivers there, in like the Chesapeake Bay. It's astonishing. Like there's so many of them that it's like incredible. But yeah, I think that's a good point. The fact that they're nomadic, they're wandering, they're constantly moving. They're just like, I don't know if they're the same way to where but
exactly. And the flatheads stay in their predictable positions and are much more vulnerable to these alternative methods.
Yeah.
You're not going to set a trout line out in 30 foot of open water suspended 15 foot deep for blues.
Yeah.
You're gonna set your, you know what I mean? It just doesn't work that way. The flatheads get hammered by trout lines, by diddy poles, by jugs, by noodlers, by rod and reel. They're in much more predictable places. They're not nomadic like that. That is why. That is exactly answers your question as to why the blues are thriving and the flatheads are not.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just I don't know. It's sad. You know, you think like we've got our pillar species in North America, our big giants. You don't want to think of our giants getting smaller or being like intentionally persecuted, but you know, I don't know. The blue catfish are just getting moved around. They're going to start catching that non-native hate before too long. Some areas they already are, but I don't understand the hate for flatheads in areas, especially where they're native to. Are there areas where they're not native to, where they're kind of catching the heat? Like I don't know that they're being moved around like the same way.
The latest areas I've heard of are from your home state of Florida. I mean,
yeah. See, I didn't know if they were native or not, but there's a big culture like the cat. There's a big culture of flathead guys in northern Florida that love them. So I didn't know if they were, you know.
Well, I mean, how long do they have to be there before they become native is the question.
Yeah, that's true. But I didn't know if they had always been there, you know. In some areas, they're just coming back where they used to be. So
we haven't always been native to the U.S.
All right, yeah.
You know.
Yeah, we can go way down that rabbit hole, but so I don't know, man. It's an interesting one. That I feel like at least now, I don't know what I've seen when I'm probably relating this more towards gar and bowfin and even carp. This like renaissance, or like there's this new type of thinking that's a little bit more accepting of those species now more than it used to. I don't know if it's the river monsters effect, but there's like, you see a little bit more people wanting to go out and experience different kinds of fish maybe than you used to 20 years ago even. So I guess that's worth something, but you know.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm trying to do, David. I'm trying to show people how. That's my whole cause. I'm trying to show people how special these fish are, how beautiful they are. You know, I catch the prettiest flatheads. I'm totally blessed by God. I don't know if you've noticed, but I catch the prettiest flatheads in the country.
Yeah,
They're gorgeous.
I would agree to that.
They're beautiful in their own way. Some people are going to always think they're ugly, but you and I both know they're beautiful. Mm-hmm. They fight incredibly hard. They're an apex predator. It's so important for the whole ecosystems, all our fisheries to have. We don't have very many of those apex predators left.
Yeah.
You know, the bass take care of, the bluegill population and the smaller stuff. What takes care of the bass and the gar and the buffalo and the carp and the drum and the quill, you know what I mean? There just has to be those big predators in our systems, and people don't understand how important that is for a healthy system.
Yeah, I think you nailed it right on the head.
They've misled to think that these big predators eat the system out. That's not the way it is. They don't. They keep it in check. Nature's way of checks and balances.
Yeah, I think you nailed it right on the head early in the conversation when you said that people are using them as a scapegoat for why
they
everything.
Are.
Yep.
For human greed. No human is going to blame themselves. Yep. Listen, and I even used to have this mind thought. How could I myself personally, as one single human being, hurt a fishery? Well, I probably can't. But when you take me, Tom, Dick, Harry, Bubba, and what everybody else is doing to that fishery, it's a cumulative fact that can, it's what's destroying fisheries today, greed and gluttony.
Yeah. Well, you can do something also just from an engineering standpoint and install a dam onto a river, and 20 years later, some fish will significantly benefit from that dam installation, while many others, you know what I mean? A lot of human-related changes can really have massive effects. So, you wonder if it just transcends so much deeper and far beyond one fish is eating too many of the other fish. It's like, no, the problem is way, 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 way deeper than that. We got to start pointing fingers at ourselves. It's too easy to say the big scary catfish is eating up all the bass.
They ate all my red ears. Them catfish ate up all my red ears.
Yeah.
No, buddy, you and your brethren did that.
Well, they always say we used to be able to fill 3 coolers. You used to do what? You used to do what? Yeah. Say that again. That was slowly.
Back in the good old days when we had gigantic non-dammed rivers and the fisheries. Every year, it's sad. I see diminishing qualities of our fisheries. I've been fishing for damn near 50 years, and I've only seen diminishment. I've seen very few fisheries that have had a surplus of anything. It's all been downhill, and that needs to change. The regulations need to change. There can't be a one-size-fits-all regulation for every waterway either. They can't say in Kansas, you can keep 5 of any size. That's good. That might be good for a reservoir, but that is not very good for a small waterway. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, people shouldn't.
A reservoir has the capacity to handle a certain amount of pressure and harvest. Whereas a smaller state fishing lake is not going to be able to sustain that same kind of pressure.
Yeah. People shouldn't want to fill 3 coolers full of fish anyway. Like that was always the line that got me. It's like me and my grandpa used to be able to fill up 5 stringers. I'm like, what? Okay, say that slower and realize that maybe the act of constantly and consistently filling buckets full of fish might have been the problem. Maybe you were the reason the fish went away. So it's not an unlimited resource. It's people think fish are...
they're just not biting anymore.
Yeah, they're not biting. Yeah, it can't be me.
There's a lot of stupid people in the world, unfortunately, David. Yeah. And they don't realize what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, man. I feel like you have sold the idea of catfishing really well, even in this conversation. And to me, like your photos, that tube fishing something I want to try probably within the next, I don't know, year or two. I got a lot on my wish list of things I want to do. You know what I mean?
You get to gallivant all over the world, you lucky bastard. On your little travels of gallivanting, come see me.
Yeah. Well, I need to do some things here in the States before I start getting all crazy ambitious again. I've never caught a muskie. I want to do the stuff with the flathead, that style, so bad. Even the alligator gar, fly fishing for the alligator gar, or with lures. But in any case, I don't think you're one of these guys that's big hot shot trying to be Mr. Instagram hero. But is there a place where people who might be interested in seeing what you're doing can go to see some of the photos, some of the, I don't know, like the tube setup? Like it's an interesting style of fishing. Now, people listening are going to want to see it. So, like, is there a place? I don't know if you're on Instagram, Facebook, anything like that, where people might be able to find you.
I'm basically not on nothing. I'm Keith Severns on Facebook. That's it.
Yeah. You know what? That's probably the better way to do it anyway.
I've had so many people ask me, why don't you guide? Why don't you take people on these float tube adventures? I wish I could. I really do. I would love to teach children how to fish. I'd love to do like some type of fishing school.
Yeah.
There's a lot of single moms these days. They don't know how to teach their little boy how to fish. I'd love to have like a fishing clinic or something, and people are always asking me, why don't you guide? I can't. The waterways in Wichita are so limited. I have like the Little Arkansas River and the Big Arkansas River. Everybody knows where the holes are at, and the good. I make it look like I'm fishing in West Virginia, like Josh Nolan, where the Flatheads do that. I make it, when the people see my pictures, they don't realize the time that it takes me. I'll like go out for 3-4 nights in a row. It's like muskie fishing, the fish of 10,000 casts. Mm-hmm. I would say flathead fishing with artificials is the fish of 50,000 casts. It's like muskie fishing, but harder. And who's into that? Who wants to do something harder? Everyone wants the easy way these days. You know what I mean? That's why you said, I don't see anybody like you in a float tube fishing for flatheads with artificials. Guess what? It's super hard. Yeah. I can't go out there and just I have to be prepared to go out on a float tube for, sometimes 8-10 hours and expect maybe one good bite.
Yeah.
It's a dedication thing. It's just a passion I have. I know I could go sit on, put a big live bait under a balloon and catch a big catfish with live bait. That's not that hard. Mm-hmm. I've decided that I love the challenge of catching these fish with artificials. I think it's awesome.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely a lot of anglers out there who that speaks more to them, and that gets them more excited than the idea of going in and it being easy. There's definitely a culture of anglers who appreciate the hunt, and they want it to be earned, and they want it to be a challenge, albeit it seems like a very small group of anglers. But I think that you've probably, I don't know, man. Like, it is a style of fishing I want to do big time. You know what I mean? So,
Hell yeah, brother. I bet you do.
But I just,
I bet you do. You go after wolffish. You go after arapaima. You've probably caught glass grouper too, haven't you?
oh yeah, I can catch them off the beach just 30 minutes
That's a
from home.
dream of mine. Hey man, you want to do a trip?
We can trade. You know what's
I
funny?
I take you float to flathead fishing. You take me for grouper.
We can absolutely make that happen. The Goliath
Hell yes.
Yeah, you know what? The Goliath grouper is sort of like the saltwater version of the flathead catfish.
Exactly. Exactly.
People do the same thing with them. Oh, they're eating up all the fish. It's just like, it is a blessing and a curse to be the biggest fish that swims. Everybody loves you and everybody hates you. So,
right.
But anyway, Keith.
Well, the reason I was touching on the reason I don't guide, I have very few good fisheries left around here in Wichita, Kansas. By the way, come to Wichita and try to catch a fish. It's not easy. Everybody around here takes. There's no releasers.
Yeah.
I can't take people guiding. They will learn my spots. They will learn everything. Why would I hurt? I do it for I could make a bunch of money off of flatheads. I'm not going to do that. I love flatheads too much. That's what I was trying to tell you. That's why I'm not rich and making money at what I do. I'm doing this for the passion of the flatheads because I love them so much, and that's why I don't take people to do this.
Yeah.
I'd be wiping out my own flathead populations.
Yep. I've met a lot of guides who very quickly realize how fast they get burned by their clients that come in and fish their spots right after booking trips with them, and they just get burnt out on it, and it becomes burdensome. I couldn't do the guide thing. I don't know, man. It's just I fish solo. I like to be alone. I love to take people and teach them things and show them stuff, but I can't be burdened with where fishing, like I have to put people on the fish. Like, you know what I mean? Like, people who come with a guide, I feel like they want the fish. They don't necessarily care as much about the experience. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I couldn't do it. I could maybe do one-off trips here and there with people. But if I was doing that every single day,
what am I going to do? And how am I going to guarantee these people anything? Like, you're going to have to come 3 nights in a row with me, and we might get a flathead bite. You know what I mean?
That's
the flatheads. You know what I mean? That's just the way flatheads are.
Yeah,
they're very snake-like. A flathead can eat a big meal and sit on it for a week if it wants to. Flatheads are very snake-like in that manner, especially in the colder water periods.
Yeah.
A flathead can eat a 2-pound carp and sit on it for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You're not going to catch that flathead.
Well, that's good to know.
You might catch another flathead that doesn't. You might catch another big flathead that doesn't have a big carp digesting in its belly.
Well, you know what? That also kind of dispels this idea that they're these gluttonous feeders that are never going to turn down a meal, and they just eat.
No.
So,
no. But that's the thing about flatheads. Even if you got a creek, and let's say it's getting overrun with flatheads, the flatheads will keep themselves in check. The flatheads will eat other flatheads if need be.
Yeah.
That's how good their systems of checks and balances are.
Yeah. That's interesting. I don't know, man. I think it's absolutely one of the most badass fish in the entire country.
You're damn right, brother. I'm so glad you recognize that, man. Yeah. They are so badass. They're so cool. They keep our fishery. One thing I want people to get from this is how important they are to our freshwater fisheries. Like we said, the gator gar are basically gone in most systems. We have nothing left to keep besides humans.
Yeah.
We do a lot of taking. We have nothing left to keep all the other stuff in check. You can't just have all non-predator species in waterways. It's not healthy.
Yeah.
That's why we need wolves. That's why we need You know what I mean? The whole balance of nature, the freshwater system depends upon the flatheads.
Yeah. Well, there's something to be said for chasing the fish that sits at the top of the heap, you know what I mean, at the top of the food chain. And I don't know, man. Adventurous anglers need to start putting that species on their radar a lot more than what I'm seeing. But Keith, dude, I appreciate your time. I think you've pitched the idea of I couldn't have picked a better like catfishy type of dude to come on here and talk about him, because some folks aren't going to want to sit and listen to bait and weight methods, but it's like we're talking about an active predator, and man, the way you do it is couldn't be more badass. The fish look awesome. The dark ones, those crazy yellow ones, the like scarred up, awesome looking fish. Man, I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate your patience with some of our technical difficulties. Because this was a fun one.
Thing, man. Hey, I could talk flatheads all night, brother.
Yeah. Well, next we just need to do it. And yeah, absolutely. If you're ever in Florida, that offer would be on the table 100%. The Goliath groupers are, people, you see the people that catch them out of the boats, the big muscle people, and they're doing the little viral videos. It's so much funner. I've got spots where I can catch them out of canoes and mangrove creeks. I've got spots where I can catch them from the beach. You're just chilling out in a beach chair. And then you get these great photos where you're like, got this damn giant grizzly bear fish like right in front of you in the shallows. But yeah, I mean, that's an easy one. I get a lot of people, a lot of overseas guys that reach out to me asking if I would take them to do that. I'm like, man, there's something to these Goliath grouper. But anyway, man, I
want to do it.
Well,
it's my dream.
I
want to do it. Put me on the first of your list. You got to take me grouper fishing.
Well, let's be in touch off the record on setting up something. Because I'm down. And if you have a hard time in winters with the catfish, winter time is the best time to catch the Goliath. So
really,
we can make it happen.
Awesome, man. Awesome.
All right, Keith. Well, I appreciate your time, man.
Thank you, man. It's been an honor, man. You're a stand-up dude, man, and you got something good going, man. I like what you're doing.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you, man. Have a good one.
All right, brother. Later.
Thank you for listening to Boundless Pursuit. Tune in each week as we bring stories and insight from uniquely talented anglers and outdoorsmen. And if you enjoyed this show, I want to hear from you. Be sure to leave a 5-star review, as this is going to drive the growth and exposure of this show. And if you have feedback or guest suggestions, I would love to hear from you. And you can reach me at boundlesspursuitfishing@gmail.com. For all other collections of media and contact information, please visit www.boundless-pursuit.com.